Is closeness with an actor more significant than fidelity to one's spouse? Today's account explores a comparable motif. Savor the tale. My spouse Abby loved attending movies. To delight her, I simply had to escort her to an engaging movie. However, I couldn't just select any movie. It needed to be within one of her favorite genres: animation, action, adventure, drama, or romance. Abby also made it a point to see nearly every movie starring Tom Torino, Matt Wright, or Brad Talbot, who were her favorite actors. Our first outing was to see Sleepless in Seattle. Even though she wasn't particularly fond of Tom Hanks, she treasured the storyline. Deep into our relationship, she revealed that she had fallen in love with me during that movie. Although I remain puzzled as to why, after a dozen years of marriage, Abby continues to be remarkably attractive. She is 5'6" tall and weighs 155 lbs, with a striking physique, and her deep emerald green eyes vividly set off against her raven black hair. When Abby prepares for a social event, she still turns heads. I am John Sawyer, and I am also fairly handsome, standing 6'1" and weighing 180 lbs, with sandy hair and blue eyes. Abby and I have consistently been considered a good-looking couple. In college, before I encountered my future wife, I dated several women, but everything changed when I met Abby. She became the one I desired. We believed our shared affection would endure indefinitely. We met in our freshman year, and our love grew throughout our 4 years at a state university, leading us to marry 3 months after graduating. Abby is my everything, my true love and soulmate. I cannot imagine a life without her. Although we deeply love our 2 children, the times we spend alone together are especially cherished. This evening was supposed to be a unique night for us. We planned to go dancing with 3 other couples, expecting a late evening, so we booked hotel rooms downtown and arranged for my parents to look after our daughters for the night, making it an extraordinarily special occasion. Yet the night took an unexpected turn. At the nightclub, I was confused by a sudden change in the ambience. The women seemed nervous, and one of the men looked self-satisfied. Of the 3 couples, I particularly favored George and Helen, and Bob and Anna. George was a software engineer, and Helen was a homemaker with 3 kids. Bob owned his plumbing company, and his wife handled the accounts. The only couple I was less fond of were Chad and Thelma. Although I enjoyed Thelma's company, she and Abby were college roommates and remained close. I disliked Chad. From my understanding, he was involved in the film industry, possibly as an agent, though not a particularly successful one, while Thelma earned well as a pharmaceutical sales representative. Professionally, I work as a financial advisor at a leading brokerage firm. Initially, business was slow, but it has since improved considerably. At my firm, once advisors secure a certain number of clients, they are encouraged to mentor a newcomer and redistribute some clients, retaining the most lucrative ones. I have already completed this process twice and am approaching a 3rd time. My income is quite satisfactory. Abby began working as an administrative assistant for Mike Winston, an executive vice president at a regional bank, and became a stay-at-home mum when our daughters were born in close succession. She resumed working when our youngest, Stacy, started 1st grade. Then one day, Mike reached out to her and announced that he had been promoted to president, and he was curious if she would be interested in working for him part-time. Abby discussed it with me, and I encouraged her to go for it. If you think I made a mistake by letting Abby return to work and now she's involved with her boss, you'd be completely wrong. Mike is 62 years old, bald, but more importantly, he is deeply devoted to his wife and 5 children. Like I said, something felt slightly off, but I couldn't quite figure out what it was, and at that moment I wasn't concerned. I was looking forward to an evening of dancing with my wife and a whole night of romance afterward. We dispersed around the room as we recognized several other couples who were present. If you dance well enough, you're bound to meet some truly delightful people. One pair was my old university buddy, Fred Abbott, and his spouse, Brenda. I stopped to converse with them while Abby and the rest proceeded to our table. I was just about to join my wife when the music started, but then a disturbance broke out at the entrance. The group gathered at the doorway and then scattered. Brenda inhaled sharply. "What's going on?" Fred inquired. "Don't you know who that is?" Brenda exclaimed, holding her breath. I looked back and noticed a remarkably handsome man. Though he stood only about 5, 6, or 7, as women would often remark, he was impressive. Both Fred and I appeared clueless. That's Brad Talbot, she announced. He and his fiancée, Rita Summers, are among the most famous figures in Hollywood. Oh, right, Fred commented and started looking. Beyond Brad. I wonder if Rita Summers is here as well. John, on a scale from 1 to 10, Rita is easily a 15. Brenda playfully hit her husband's arm. Keep dreaming. As I looked at Brad, I immediately recognized him. He was one of my wife's preferred actors. I thought about getting her his autograph, but what happened next was totally unexpected. Brad came over to our table and asked my wife to dance. Without any hesitation, she got up and danced with him for 4 consecutive songs. I walked to the table and sat down, completely livid. My wife hadn't even checked if I was fine with her dancing with another man. When the 5th song started, I planned to intervene, but at that moment, Chad's glass fell to the ground. As he bent over to pick up the broken glass, he said, "John, could you help me with this?" I glanced at my dancing wife and then at Chad. I should have gone to my wife, but instead, I followed Chad to the men's bathroom. When we got there, the cut was quite small. Still, I helped him clean and bandage it with a paper towel. When I returned to the table, I only saw my wife leaving with Brad. I rushed after them, with Chad closely following. As we got to the front door and into the parking lot, I saw Abby getting into the car with Brad. I quickly tried to reach the car. Just as I saw Brad kiss Abby's hand while she laughed at something he said, Chad tripped me. I fell but immediately stood up. "What on earth did you do?" I yelled. "Brad is just taking your wife for a ride," he grinned. Thelma appeared shortly after. "This is Abby's dream date," she told Chad and me, explaining how much she admired Brad, so we agreed he should ask her out. "This is my wife," I shouted. "Didn't you think I deserved to know about this? Abby told us you'd say no." Chad grinned. "Just relax, go with the flow," I shouted and lunged, hitting Chad squarely on the bridge of his nose. The sound of his nose cracking was the only pleasing moment of the evening. Thelma then charged at me, throwing punches and trying to kick me. Fortunately, Fred saw what was happening and came over. He quickly pulled Thelma away and put her on the other side of him. He attacked my husband. Thelma began yelling, "No, he didn't do it." Fred responded calmly, "You both attacked him first. He was simply defending himself." Thelma got furious and called 911. The police arrived about 10 minutes later and began taking statements. Fred continued his narrative and I related the same events, noting that Chad had hit me in the legs first. The onlookers who had gathered after the commotion saw only Thelma attacking me. They told the police that all they had seen was me trying to get away from her. Chad and Thelma were eventually taken into custody by the time the officers left. I was devastated. I went back to our table and saw 2 women smiling. "Where is everyone else?" Helen asked. "Chad and Thelma were arrested for attacking me," I replied, trying hard to contain my fury. Abby had departed with Brad and seemed quite happy about it. "This shouldn't have occurred," Anna commented. She had just walked outside with Brad to take some pictures before they went back to their seats. I observed that my wife and Thelma clearly had not revealed the true intentions as I stood up to grab a drink. Fred met me at the bar. "Will you be all right?" he asked. "I'm completely unaware of what's going on," I admitted. "I'm hoping my wife has merely taken a drive with this film star and will be back shortly. When she returns, we need to have a serious talk." "Listen, John," Fred expressed with concern, "I'm not trying to cause issues, but Brenda has told me that Brad Talbot is notoriously unfaithful. He seems to enjoy engaging with married women. I don't want this to affect Abby, but you might want to brace yourself for the possibility of bad news." My spirits dropped. Not sure what to do next, I reassured Fred that I'd handle it before going back to our table. I tried calling Abby on her mobile. It went straight to voicemail. The mood was very strained. As I sat down, the wives looked extremely ashamed, and the husbands appeared angry. I continued attempting to reach Abby without success. Later, 2 couples indicated they were returning to the hotel. I chose to wait a bit longer to see if Abby would come back. I lingered for half an hour before making my way to the hotel. There, I continued until 3 a.m., dialing Abby's number every 10 minutes. Eventually, out of exasperation, I checked out and drove back home. I got home about 4 a.m. and settled on the sofa. I must have fallen asleep because the sunlight streaming through our bay window woke me up. It was now 7 a.m. I looked in our bedroom, but Abby was not there. Then I checked my phone, no messages from Abby. So I logged. onto my computer and opened our Facebook page. It was swamped with images of Brad and Abby exiting a nightclub, photos of them going into his place, photos of Abby entering Brad's home on his arm. I browsed Hollywood websites, and they were all focusing on Brad's newest scandal with a married woman. At that point, rage overwhelmed me. I immediately phoned my lawyer, and since it was Saturday, my call was forwarded to his home. He wasn't happy about the call until I explained the circumstances. He recommended that I wait until Abby returned and explained her actions. Finally, around 11, the front door opened, and Abby walked in with a wide grin, which disappeared as soon as she saw my face. We didn't do anything, Abby insisted right away. We just spent the evening talking. I know I should have asked you, but I was sure you would object. You know how much I love films, and Brad Tellett is one of my favorite stars. Last night felt like a dream. Nothing happened, John. I still love you deeply. I just gazed at her, feeling the steam nearly burst from my ears. I need you to collect your things and go to your parents' home because I can't stand to look at you right now, John. Why do you make such a big deal out of everything? She questioned, her voice tinged with irritation and a touch of fear. We were just talking, it was nothing important. It truly doesn't matter. This is extremely important to me, I asserted, clenching my teeth. I don't believe for a second that nothing happened, but just for the sake of argument, let's assume it didn't. You still embarrass me in front of everyone. Now, you're just being dramatic, John, Abby countered, her hands on her hips. No one outside our group knows, and Helen and Anna know that to me, it was just a harmless adventure. You fool, I exclaimed, startling Abby. I had never yelled at her like that before. This is front page news across all Hollywood media. They have photos of you and Brad leaving the nightclub, arriving at his home, and by now they probably have pictures of you exiting his place this morning. I think our marriage is over, so pack up your things. Depart before I commit an act one will later lament. John, please, I'm convinced you're exaggerating, Abby implored, her eyes now brimming with tears. I adore you unreservedly. Forgive me if I caused you distress, but honestly, nothing transpired. I realized it would irritate you, yet I assumed you'd disregard it once you discovered nothing occurred. We must resolve this. Then consider our daughters. You neglected your daughters when you stormed out tonight with that celebrity idiot I snapped at her. Would you appreciate it if Stacy or Gail behaved similarly as they mature? Abby paled at these remarks and then started sobbing. I deeply regret it, John. I didn't comprehend its significance. I made a mistake. Please pardon me. You're right, I was thoughtless. My rage intensified by the second, and I found myself overwhelmed with fury. I had to remove Abby from our home before I committed a regrettable action, so I left her in the corridor and proceeded to our bedroom. I fetched a suitcase from the wardrobe and began flinging Abby's garments into it. I've got this, Abby uttered amidst her tears shortly thereafter. She then methodically packed her suitcase and carried it downstairs. I didn't lend a hand. I waited until she passed through the front door before forcefully closing it. I ensured her departure by observing from the window. I watched as she placed her suitcase in the car's trunk and settled into the driver's seat. Then she leaned her head against the steering wheel and wept. I refrained from going outside to console her. My anger was too intense. Roughly 20 minutes later, she ignited the engine and left. I promptly contacted my parents and relayed the circumstances. I inquired if they could look after the girls longer and to inform Abby that the girls were with me should she visit. They agreed. I was then left to reflect on the ruins of our marriage. I endlessly pondered the entire scenario. Abby maintained that nothing happened. Was this the truth? I was skeptical, yet a part of me suspected she was being deceptive. Could I overlook her actions and move forward, presuming, as she believed, that only our close acquaintances were aware, now that it was public knowledge? I envisioned no future in our marriage. I desired retribution against them both, but was unable to formulate a viable strategy for it. I sobbed for over an hour, pounding on walls and doors as I roamed the house. I felt utterly desolate. Confronting Brad was out of the question. He was a Hollywood heavyweight, untouchable. I realized that a divorce could financially damage me, but if necessary I was prepared to telecommute and battle for sole custody of the girls, considering I was evidently the more stable parent. I believed I had a strong case by 1 p.m. I was just making more coffee when the phone rang. Until then, the media hadn't acquired my number. but I anticipated that wouldn't last. "Hello," I answered. "This is John Sawyer, and your wife is Abby," a female voice inquired. "Look," I snapped abruptly. "I'm not interested in speaking with reporters," a gentle giggle echoed, like the ringing of bells. "Okay," the voice agreed, "I'm not fond of them either." "Who is this?" I demanded, prepared to hang up. "My name is Rita Sue," she stated calmly. "I assume you're acquainted with my fiancé Brad Talbot." "Yes, I'm aware of him," I acknowledged. I recognized the idiot. I was uncertain where this discussion was leading, but I was eager to conclude it quickly. "Do you still love your wife?" Rita asked, puzzling me. I sighed. Despite her actions, I still love her. However, after everything that's happened, I don't see a way to salvage our marriage. I simply can't accept what she's done. If I could offer a means to possibly save your marriage and also mend my own relationship with Brad, would you be interested? My heart began to beat erratically. I took a moment to sit and contemplate. Eventually, I responded, "Yes, I would like to preserve my marriage, but I don't see how that's possible." Another soft laugh followed by a sigh came through. "I've cherished Brad for many years. We've been friends since childhood. He comes from a profoundly troubled family. Like me, his father was unfaithful, which led his mother to loathe all men. She consistently withheld affection from Brad. His actions never satisfied his mother. He has repeatedly engaged with married women in the past. I believe this behavior is Brad's method of seeking the affection he never received from his mother. In a similar vein, in my family, my mother struggled with alcoholism and my father was violent. I deeply cherished Brad's father. During that time, he was all I had, yet he departed following his divorce from Brad's mother. I cried for days. We re-established contact in Hollywood after both of us became famous. Aware of the rumors surrounding Brad, I was hesitant to engage with him, but once we reconnected, we instantly fell back in love. Upon our engagement, he convinced me his relationships with married women had ceased. When I questioned him regarding your wife, he insisted that nothing transpired. I lack any evidence to the contrary, but presently the possibility of losing Brad fills me with dread. Yes, my wife also confirmed that nothing occurred, I admitted, and the prospect of losing her distresses me as well. Do you believe her? No, I'm unsure. And I'm unsure as well. I know Brad well, and it's completely out of character for him to invite a woman over and not engage in anything, yet perhaps more bizarre events have happened. Still, I believe something did occur, and I needed to understand the pain he inflicted on me, and I expect your wife to realize the same. It might not suffice, but I hope that if we succeed, we can move forward with our partners. I'm on board for now, I stated. What's your plan? I won't be doing this. Alone, we'll tackle it together, Rita answered. You'll need to clarify, as I'm unsure how I can contribute. First off, she explained, to maximize the impact of what I intend to do, I need you to slowly start a conversation with your wife about possibly making amends. I'll do the same with Brad. Currently, I'm not speaking to him. I expect to begin conversations with Brad in 2 to 3 weeks, and you should have your wife move back in around the same time. I'll signal when you should still maintain your distance, and you mustn't sleep with her. Why should I let her back into the house? I questioned. Because once she's home, we will meet, and I will reveal my strategy. I still have parts of my plan to finalize, Rita continued. I was uncertain about it, but lacking any better ideas, I decided to go ahead with it. The first step was to call my parents and let them know I would be picking up the girls in 30 minutes. Next, I informed my administrative assistant, Joni, that I would be working from home the following week. From her tone, I sensed she was already aware of the situation with Brad and my Abby. She was very supportive and encouraged me to reach out if I needed any help. Lastly, I called Abby's parents at their home. Her father, sounding remorseful and having seen some news reports, was immensely relieved when I asked to speak with Abby. She cried over the phone, apologizing earnestly and expressing her wish to come home to discuss matters. Listen, Abby, I calmly said, I think it's best if we take some time apart for now. I'll be working remotely next week, and you'll work Monday to Wednesday. How about you pick up the girls Wednesday evening? Then we can talk everything over. I plan to collect the girls Sunday evening, please, John, she implored. I want to return home now. Don't you want us to be a family again? I thought we were a family, I responded sadly, but then you made me doubt everything we had. I'll see you Wednesday around 5. I picked up the girls and informed them that Mom would be staying with their grandparents for a few days. They were curious about the reason, but the issue faded when we stopped at McDonald's. The girls played for a couple of hours, then we had dinner. As we got home, the phone rang. I checked the caller ID, not recognizing it. When I answered, the reporter asked if I wanted to comment on my wife's affair with Brad Talbot. I ended the call after that. The phone continued to ring every 5 minutes. Eventually, I unplugged it and walked away around 6. My mobile phone chimed. Abby was calling. "Why aren't you picking up your phone calls?" she inquired sharply. "Because it's only journalists asking for my comments on your supposed affair with Brad Talbot." "There is no affair," Abby, I asserted. "I've told you nothing happened. Then you should make that clear to everyone else, because they seem not to believe it," I retorted with sarcasm. Silence followed on her end of the call. Abby then requested to speak with the girls, so I handed them the phone and listened to their conversation. They discussed their day at McDonald's. Finally, Stacy returned the phone to me, mentioning that my mother wished to talk. Abby once more begged to return home. "I need more time," I responded. Abby showed up on Wednesday night at 4 p.m. instead of 5. Although slightly irritated that she ignored my previous request, I opted to leave things be. The girls were overjoyed to see her, receiving her kisses warmly. When she moved to kiss me, I stepped away. She stared at me, her expression a mix of hurt and annoyance. "So this is our situation now," she stated irritably. "If that's what it comes down to, perhaps I should take the girls and go if that's your choice," I said calmly and turned to leave. "No, John," Abby quickly interjected, her voice laced with urgency. "I think we need to discuss our problems." The girls began packing their overnight bags after Abby told them they would be visiting their grandparents. "What's our plan?" Abby inquired, following a tense pause. "I wish I had an answer," I admitted. "Currently I am feeling hurt, humiliated, and angry. Do you have any ideas on how to help me?" "Overcome these feelings, all I can offer is my apology," Abby replied, her voice quivering. "I made a terrible mistake. Please forgive me. I can't bear to lose you, Abby. It's not that easy," I declared, sitting back and folding my arms. "Everyone sees me as the deceived husband. My wife cheated and I stood by. It was never my intention to cause you pain," Abby cried. "Meeting Brad Talbot and visiting his house was a thrill for me. I knew you might be a bit upset with me, but I didn't expect all this turmoil." "Abby, I truly hope we can sort this out," I commented, and her face lit up momentarily. "However, I also need to tell you that I have consulted a lawyer in case this ends in separation. I plan to seek full custody of the girls, and I recommend you hire a lawyer too. I don't want us to split," she wept, "nor will I let you take my daughters, Abby. I'm not saying we'll definitely separate, but we need to prepare for the worst," I clarified. "Though it was a lie," I added, "I don't want to hurt you, but remember your recent scandal could sway the court to favor my custody claim." "Please don't," Abby pleaded. "I'll do anything to bring us back together. Why don't we continue this talk?" I suggested. "Actually, why not have lunch next Sunday when you hand over the girls? What if I decide to keep the girls?" She snapped, clearly angry. "I hate shuttling them back and forth. It's not good for them. If you force this, I'll have to start divorce proceedings immediately. And remember, you compromised your integrity," I warned. "The court will probably look unfavorably on an adulterous mother with impressionable daughters at that." Abby's resolve faded. "I can't do it. I don't want a divorce." At the beginning of the next week, I went back to my office where my assistants demonstrated significant sympathy. A few clients, specifically 2, found amusement in my predicament and taunted me. I politely asked them to stop discussing it, but they continued to mock me. "I've had enough," I announced, choosing to sever our ties and transfer their files to another firm. Despite their apologies, I firmly ended our professional relationship. Soon, nobody brought up my wife and Brad anymore. Around 2 p.m., Rita called. "Are you free tonight?" she asked. To my response of no plans, she declared, "Good, because you're joining me for dinner at Zoom Zoom restaurant at 7. A tie and jacket are required." Then she hung up. I was surprised to find out she had managed a reservation at Zoom Zoom, the most exclusive restaurant in the city, known for being difficult to book and expensive. I showed up at 7 p.m. and was led to a private room at the back, equipped with a single table and an opulent velvet couch. Brief flashes of what could occur on that couch passed through my mind. Shortly after, the door opened and Rita Summers entered. As I rose, her presence was striking. I was convinced her entrance could captivate the whole restaurant. She seemed to be about 5'4", with long blonde hair, gentle brown eyes, and an impressive figure. Her smile was especially captivating. I couldn't understand why Brad would stray from a woman with her charm. "May I call you John?" she suggested, sitting opposite me. I nodded and asked how I could reach her. "Rita, naturally," she answered, her light laughter making me grin. We ordered drinks and enjoyed a conversation. I talked a little about my job, but mostly entertained her with funny stories about my daughters and memories of my awkward teenage years. Later, the waiter came to take our food orders. I was intrigued by Rita's motives, but didn't want to press her, eagerly anticipating her explanation. I wasn't opposed to rescuing my marriage, but I was clueless about how to proceed. When we finished our meal, she leaned back in her chair. "First off, John." Rita began with a sorrowful smile. "That sly fox, Chad Tompkins, masterminded this entire turmoil. He poses as a movie agent, but really he's just a broker. He sets up unsuspecting men and women to fall prey to movie stars. You wouldn't believe how many people, especially married women, end up in affairs with movie stars because of Chad's schemes. You're talking to someone who knows this firsthand," I retorted angrily. Yet I was unsure of the exact nature of Chad's involvement. At least I had managed to confront him. Physically, really, Rita's eyes brightened. "That's good, but you shouldn't be too hard on your wife. I believe Brad could tempt Mother Teresa out of her undergarments. As you're aware, your wife isn't the first married woman he's enchanted, but I intend to make her the last. And if I can't manage that, then what I'm proposing will at least make up for the hurt they caused us. I can't promise that after my plan, either of us will stay with our partners, but despite that, we will have the satisfaction of avenging their lies and deceit." I was a bit taken aback by Rita's willingness to forgive my wife, but I was relieved to hear there would be some form of revenge. Now I just needed her to lay out how we were going to do it. "What are you suggesting exactly?" I asked. "Before I get into details, I just want to say that you are an exceptionally handsome man and you are also quite charming. I think your wife was foolish to jeopardize your marriage. If we had met under different circumstances, I would definitely be interested in dating you. That's very kind of you. But we both know we live in completely different worlds. And not only are you beautiful, you're extraordinarily stunning. You are very gracious. Of course, you're right about our two different worlds, but that doesn't change the fact that I find you very appealing." "Thank you," was all I managed to say because I was eager to hear the plan. "So what's our next move?" "Within the next 2 weeks, I plan to become your client," Rita revealed. "I'm sorry, I don't quite understand client." "Yes, you do offer financial advice to your clients, don't you?" Rita asked with a grin. "Yes, certainly," I replied, still uncertain about her intentions. "Next, I intend to put some funds into investments," she declared straightforwardly. "Nevertheless, we'll require 3 or 4 discussions to review the contracts. 4 seems to be the optimal count. 2 of these discussions will be conducted in your office and 2 as lunch meetings. I will select the venues personally." "Okay," I responded, still puzzled as to why I was agreeing to this. "I'm able to set up an account, but you need to put in at least $10,000 actually. I'm planning to invest significantly more," she remarked, with an even wider smile. "In the meantime, you mustn't inform your wife that I am your client. You will keep seeing her to talk about reconciling. In a fortnight, you'll let her move back in, but you won't share a bed with her. On October 15th, you and your wife must go to a gala. Evening that is of utmost importance. It is an event for the charity I helped start and have supported for the past 5 years. Few people link me with charitable efforts, which I prefer. I go to charity functions biennially. I wouldn't have gone this year since I attended the previous one, but I will be present. And so will you and your wife. Okay, I'll accompany you to the charity gala." I consented. I am well aware that tickets for this event are priced at $220,000 each. I can't rationalize spending that amount of money. Rita laughed again, then beamed. A shiver ran from my scalp to my toes. "Your tickets will be free. Just tell your wife that they were a gift from a client." I still didn't see how this would accomplish anything. "Well, you see, John, part of the evening's entertainment is the escort auction." "Escort auction?" "Not that kind of escort," she laughed again. "We auction off willing men to the women present. The woman or man who bids the highest for a person will put a kind of slave collar on him, and then the men are at the disposal of the women who bought them." Rita spoke with amusement before she continued, explaining that typically the participants are single, although married men also participate so their wives can bid on them. Sometimes, a married man is bought by someone other than his wife. I understand these married men act very properly, as their wives would otherwise cut off their genitals. Yet at this year's gala, a married man will be auctioned, and his wife will not secure the winning bid, and what ensues will be anything but benign. I still wore a bewildered look. Rita chuckled and patted my hand. You are a married man who will be auctioned, and I will place the highest bid. So you just need to rent a tuxedo, buy your wife a new dress, and come with me. It suddenly dawned on me what Rita had orchestrated, and it was brilliant. Both Brad and Abby were going to see what it was like for us. Of course I knew it was all an act, but just being seen with Rita Summers while everyone thought the worst could have a major effect. This would shift the burden to Brad. Similarly, my wife would endure the same distress and humiliation I had faced. Then maybe we could consult a therapist and get past this. The weeks flew by quickly. The first day Rita walked into my office, I thought all the women there were about to faint. Our lunches took place in very private restaurants. I didn't understand why we met covertly when all significant matters could be discussed at my office. Mainly, we exchanged stories. These lunches were delightful, and I discovered a lot about Rita and Brad. She truly loved him and would be devastated if they parted, but she was prepared to leave him if he continued his past behaviors. A week before the gala, I allowed Abby to come back, yet I told her I would sleep in the spare room. She was saddened but didn't object. The Wednesday before the gala, I got home with the tickets, and Abby's eyes lit up. She gushed about the celebrities who would be there, then scolded me for the cost. It was free, I clarified. A client gave me the tickets. I anticipated that the evening would be fun. Incidentally, I believe you should acquire a new dress, one that's quite elegant. Abby was ecstatic. I nearly felt sorry for her, but then I recalled that evening I expected to be enchanting, which instead ended in embarrassment. Now, it was her time to experience the discomfort I felt. Upon our arrival, roughly 500 individuals were already present. As we signed in, my attention was drawn to a queue at the auction registration table, where several men were completing paperwork. Noticing 5 handsome men in line, I teasingly pointed them out to Abby. It's a charity event and the tickets were free. How about I register and you can place a bid on me? Abby let out a laugh, although it wasn't as infectious as Rita's. I'm out of cash, and I didn't even bring my purse since it's too small. Following Rita's advice, I had brought money. Here's $11,000. You probably won't need all of it, but it's for a good cause, so start bidding at $200. Remember, you're easily worth $1,000 or more, Abby said, smiling widely. I lined up, and when my turn came, I completed and signed the registration form. A glance at the list showed about 18 or 20 men were signed up. If I hadn't known it was staged, I wouldn't have dared to join. As I was leaving, the woman at the desk inquired, "Are you married?" I confirmed, and she handed me another form. "Your wife must be here. She needs to sign this to allow you to participate." I called over Abby and explained what was needed. She quickly filled out and signed the form. Unbeknownst to Abby, because she hadn't read the form carefully, she had agreed to let me fulfill any request from the highest bidder. After completing the paperwork, we proceeded to our table. Rita showed us to a table seated with 2 starlets, 1 TV presenter, and 2 soap opera actors. My wife was not only thrilled by our table companions, but also by the other celebrities at the event. When the auction commenced, all the male volunteers were called up. I smiled at my wife and stood. It seemed Rita planned for me to be last by my turn. They had already raised over $300,000, and I must say the bidding was lively and fun. Our next contestant is a local, announced the MC, a well-known game show host named John Sawyer, who is married with 2 kids. I bet his wife is raiding her savings now. Let's start the bidding at $50. "I think he's worth at least $100, called out an elderly lady in the front row. "Can you wash dishes, dear?" I chuckled and replied, "I can wash and dry," which drew a hearty laugh from the audience. "That's more than my husband does," another elderly lady exclaimed. "I'll bid $200. The bid quickly rose to $500. Shortly after, I heard Abby shout, "I'll bid $1,000. This sparked cheers, but almost immediately a younger woman raised the bid to $2,000. Before long, the bid surged to $5,000. Abby looked around, clearly confused. I just shrugged. Then, a bid of $10,000 was followed swiftly by $155,000 from the back of the hall. Had I not been aware of the setup, I might have felt overwhelmed. The bid climbed to $225,000 and I began to feel anxious. I had thought a few thousand would seal the deal. It was much more than I had expected. Finally, Rita's voice came from the back, bidding $100,000. The room fell silent, not only due to the amount but also because it was Rita bidding. Rita Summers walked toward the stage as applause broke out. She grinned at me, faced the crowd, and declared, "And I don't care if he knows how to wash dishes." The room erupted in cheers and applause once more. I must admit I blushed deeply. Rita came forward, fastened a traditional necklace around my neck, and tenderly kissed my lips on the stage. In mutual agreement, we headed back to where Abby was seated. She appeared shocked and at a loss for words or actions, leading me to simply shrug and remark, "Well, I didn't see this coming, Abby, but don't stress, it likely won't happen. Here's the car keys. As I understand the rules, I'm Miss Summers's companion for the next 12 hours, but maybe more. See you at home." Tomorrow at the gala, Rita and I shared several dances, during which she continuously murmured into my ear. I saw Abby looking at us, her expression one of utter bewilderment. When Rita grasped my arm and pressed her body against me as we exited the ballroom, I noticed Abby's lips tremble. Post-gala, we were chauffeured in a limousine to another club. There, we danced and conversed for an hour. Subsequently, we went to an exclusive screening of a recent movie intended for Hollywood's elite. I found the film disappointing. Rita concurred, but upon meeting the director, we were both impressed. The limousine later transported us to a dilapidated part of town. When we stopped, I observed two vehicles behind us, described by Rita as her security team. She pointed out two old homes across from each other. One with a porch light on was my former home. Brad resided in the house opposite. The area wasn't as run down in the past, though it wasn't great. Around 3 a.m. we arrived at Rita's flat. She disclosed owning 6 apartments, one in Hollywood, one in New York, one in Florida, 2 in Europe, and 1 in South America. This particular apartment was 3 stories tall, fitting 2 average houses within it. Inside the office, Rita offered me a drink. Sitting on the sofa, I laughed, regretting not having a camera to capture Abby's face, feeling somewhat guilty about it, though not entirely. Rita sat very close, resting her hand on my knee. "John, honestly, did your wife make you believe nothing happened? We may never confirm it, but I think they were involved," I shared sorrowfully. "I know, John, and I'm 99.9% sure Brad spent a night with your wife," Rita expressed with frustration. "This twist seems all right," she murmured and softly kissed me. This unexpected move surprised me. I had thought we'd go to Rita's and sleep in different rooms, letting everyone think otherwise, but we'd know the truth. Now, she was presenting a different scenario. It didn't require much time for me to decide. Perhaps a better man would have declined, but still hurt by my wife's actions, and honestly, who would pass up an opportunity with Rita Summers? We kissed passionately on the sofa for about 20 minutes, the proximity to such an incredibly attractive woman exhilarating. She then led me by the hand into her bedroom and began a sensual striptease. The initial kiss was intense. I wished Abby would do such things for me. I'd relish waking up like this. Occasionally, after Rita led me to orgasm, we made love once more. Then, looking at my watch, I realized it was nearly 11 p.m. I should have been home by now, I remarked. Rita laughed at my bewildered look. "Remember, your wife wasn't worried when you were waiting at home. And remember, nothing happened." I laughed and we showered together. Afterward, as we dressed, Rita prepared eggs while we waited for the limousine. On my way home, I finally felt at peace, thinking if Abby had wanted, we could now work on moving past everything. When I walked into our home, Abby was weeping in the living room. "I was uncertain if you would return," she expressed with sadness. "The media is abuzz that Rita Summers spent $100,000 for a night with you. Initially, I thought it was mere revenge, but then I observed how she gazed at you. If she invested that much, she must genuinely care for you, yet I don't blame you for your actions. There a future for us to start, Abby?" I was dishonest. "Nothing transpired," I answered. Her gaze intensified with anger, yet it soon dissipated. "Actually, Rita is my latest client," I explained to my wife. She thought it appropriate, given Brad's actions towards me. Moreover, R was the one who handed me the tickets. She typically contributes anonymously $100,000 annually. This year, Rita disclosed it to convey a message to her betrothed. So yes, it was a vendetta against Brad. Our future together hinges on you. If you are willing to mend our relationship and go to therapy, I'm committed as well. Abby rushed into my embrace, and I kissed her passionately. Then we retreated to our bedroom. I'm not sure from where I summoned the vigor, but we made love twice. Afterwards, I returned to sleep until my 2 daughters woke me around 2 p.m. We enjoyed a tranquil dinner with our daughters. And post their bedtime, Abby and I held hands on our patio. It was then I realized we could mend our relationship. Abby and I chose an adept counselor, Wendy, who was highly effective in addressing our problems. Interestingly, Wendy was more rigorous with Abby. I assumed that, being a woman, she might favor my wife, yet she pointed out that Abby was contemplating time apart from our marriage, whereas I was not, although we both affirmed that nothing occurred. I suspect Wendy didn't fully trust us, but she noted that even considering leaving our partners for another counts as unfaithfulness. Abby blushed deeply throughout much of the dialogue. Wendy slightly justified my actions since she saw my scenario as Rita retaliating against her fiancé. This was indeed the truth, but what Wendy didn't know was my significant role in devising and executing these plans. Still, the sessions were productive. There is a setback: Abby has grown to dislike going to the movies. She also avoids watching films on TV, yet she will accompany her friends to children's movies if they desire. Concerning Chad and Thelma, I dropped the accusations against Thelma. I informed the police that she thought she was protecting her husband. Nonetheless, I pursued the charges against Chad, and he spent 3 months in the county detention center. Chad and Thelma were removed from our circle, and Abby has ceased speaking to Thelma following a fierce dispute, accusing her of almost ruining our marriage. I can't fully understand my wife's logic. Rita and Brad hosted what was termed the wedding of the century, attended by over 1,000 guests. If you weren't invited, you were deemed unimportant in Hollywood. Abby and I were not invited, but I did send Brad a wedding present, a set of bullhorns with a note saying, "Stay away from my wife, and I'll stay away from yours." I was still annoyed with Brad when I sent the horns, but Rita told me that Brad found the gift humorous and displayed it in his office under a framed version of the note. However, considering the nature of Hollywood, their marriage dissolved within a year. True to her word, Rita divorced him after she found out he resumed his pursuits of married women, yet they maintained a friendship. It's regrettable because Rita truly cherished him, as she had demonstrated throughout their time together, forging a bond that was stronger than usual, yet it proved inadequate. Rita remains a client of mine. When she initially set up her account, she transferred $1 million. I expected that she would terminate the account following her intended vengeance, but instead, Rita kept it active. When the balance climbed to $1.5 million, she contributed an additional $2 million. I haven't seen her in person since the day following the gala, but we communicate at least 4 times annually to review her investments. Sometimes she phones to check on her account, but occasionally it's merely to converse. I find these conversations particularly enjoyable. Rita is a shrewd entrepreneur and, unexpectedly, very prudent with her investments, even when we update her portfolio quarterly. After a quick 20-minute discussion, we often spend another hour or 2 talking about our personal lives. After her divorce from Brad, Rita humorously suggested she should have chosen me instead, and since then, she has playfully warned me to watch out for her. It's her hypothetical scenario that if I ever become single and she decides to settle down, she'll do all it takes to be with me. I know it's all in good fun, but it's an amusing fantasy to consider. Abby and I are approaching our 10th wedding anniversary. We've faced our trials, but overall, it's been an exceptional marriage. Reflecting on it, I'm convinced that if Rita hadn't stepped in, my marriage to Abby might have ended. Nowadays, I can't imagine life without her. Oh, and one more thing: Abby is pregnant, and we are expecting a little boy. I'm excitedly looking forward to this next chapter. What do you think of our story today? In my opinion, it was completely inappropriate for the wife to meet her favorite actor without informing her husband, which briefly jeopardized their marriage. What's your view? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next video.